Hi, this is Street Life and I'm Natasha, sharing my experience and tips for visiting the Oriental Pearl Restaurant. The Oriental Pearl Restaurant is a Chinese dim sum place located in Atlanta's Chamblee neighborhood. If you're unfamiliar, you can think of dim sum as small plates of various Asian dishes such as dumplings, buns, and rice noodle rolls, as well as mains consisting of meats, seafood. The environment is very nice. When you pull up, there's ample parking. You approach the building, it's very nicely decorated on the inside and the outside. It looks nice and clean. It's not super fancy, but it's welcoming. And it's just like a cool place to hang out. It was my first time on this occasion at this particular dim sum restaurant, but probably like my fifth or sixth time going to a dim sum place in general. And what I liked about this location, the Oriental Pearl Restaurant, is that when you walk in, number one, it was kind of like the same setup. You come into the building, it has like these Asian decorations on the outside. And again, when you walk in, it's like this thing of walking into a banquet hall. It's actually pretty impressive. Really nice setup, several large tables with about space for maybe 10 or so people. What I liked about this place is that you sit at the table and then there's like this lazy Susan thing in the middle. Some of the places I've been to in the past is just a stationary table. So the dishes would be put on the table in front of you and you and your other dining guests, your companions, would have to just hand the items back and forth. But here you have like this lazy Susan apparatus in the middle of the table. And as you order your food, they would like put the items on this lazy Susan. And instead of having to hand like the items from one person to another, you would just turn the lazy Susan and the item would come to you. Now, granted, that means that you then have to coordinate with your dining companions so that when they're trying to take something off of the table, you're not spinning it to grab your own, like, serving item or whatever it is. Pretty much dim sum is, if you think of tapas, but with Asian food, right? And like Chinese food, but not necessarily the Chinese food that we think of here in America. It's like soup dumplings, various types of rolls, and you walk in to be seated in like a very large banquet room at like tables where people come around. They have these small little carts filled with baskets of food. And the way that it works is that you're seated at your table, and as they come around with the carts, you point at the things that you think you might like. Well, to begin with, you're given a card, right? And as they come around with these carts, you point at the items you want, they give them to you, and they make like a little notation on your card. At the end of this, they then total up the price for all the things that you've had, and you pay the bill. I love dim sum restaurants because they provide an opportunity to try a variety of different things. It's part of the reason that I like tapas as well, where so often when we go to traditional restaurants, you sit down, you might order maybe a drink, appetizer, entree, dessert, but it sort of provides a limited opportunity to try things because your entree is typically, it's like pretty big, right? The appetizer may or may not be as well. And generally, you just order like one item from each part of the menu. You'd have to go back to the restaurant several times to try different things. That, or if you're with like other people, like myself, what I used to do sometimes when I used to travel with my mom is that we would order different things and then just split the things in half, which would then allow you to try more things. Like tapas and then dim sum, you're served smaller plates, which are generally cheaper than a full entree. And so with that, it provides an opportunity for you to try even more things. The dishes you get, like, generally it's like dumplings or something like that. It'll be a small container and there might be like 4 little dumplings in it. And so with that, you get an opportunity to try more things because they're smaller plates. Like you might have ribs, chicken feet, which I like, or like these salt and pepper shrimps and things like that. And in addition to that, when you sit at the table, what they do is like they give you condiments. You're given chopsticks, but you can also eat with a fork if you prefer. But there's like these condiments that you can dip your different items into, so like soy sauce and things like that. And they'll also give you like a pot of tea, which they'll refill over the course of the meal. If you want, you can order water or soda or something along those lines. It can be maybe a little bit intimidating to step out and try like new places by yourself. But in my experience in going out for dim sum, it's always been positive because either you end up being seated with people that are happy to explain things to you, to make recommendations and suggestions, or even the people that come around with the food, like the servers, they're also excited to explain things to you. And this is actually one of the things that I notice with traveling, right, with food and culture in particular, is that I believe that most people are genuinely nice, or at least decent. And you find that people tend to be very open, willing to share their culture, as long as you show yourself as being open and willing to learn and to accept, that information. It can be a really great experience and one that I highly recommend. Going out for dim sum is a great experience for adults, but I think if you have kids that are willing to try different things, it can be a great experience for them as well. One of my coworkers that came along, she brought her kids, and they weren't toddlers. They were like maybe 7, 8, 9, something like that. With them being willing to try different things, they had an absolutely amazing time where, sure, like she ordered like fried rice for them, which they were familiar with, but then they also tried like these other things that they hadn't had before. And the restaurant server, seeing that they were enjoying the food and enjoying the experience, they even brought over some items for free for them to try. Now, don't go here expecting freeness, because you probably won't get it. But it was very nice of them in that, like they ended up giving us like these donuts and like stuff that we didn't even order just to try. Depending on the city you live in, if there's a sizable Asian population, if your city has like a Chinatown or something along those lines, I'm sure there's at least one dim sum restaurant. And if your city is large enough to have a decent size, like a dedicated Chinatown, you'll probably be able to find a good 2 or 3 dim sum places, like good places. With the Oriental Pearl Restaurant, I found out about it from coworkers. They've been to different dim sum places. They made recommendations for various places, but suggested this one in particular because not only had they visited and had a positive experience, but they'd been there multiple times and had positive experiences each visit. Now, my suggestion would be, as I've found with some other places, is that the best time to go for dim sum is on the weekends, especially on a Saturday. Like Saturday, early afternoon, around lunchtime is a great time. The reason being that this tends to be when these places are most busy. So you get the greatest variety of items to choose from. And not just that, because the restaurants tend to be fuller at that time. You have more people, there's more turnover in the food. So I feel like the food tends to be freshest at this time. You get like the best case scenario for an experience on a Saturday afternoon, but early in the afternoon. So like late morning, early afternoon, brunch time. So I definitely recommend, if you're in Atlanta looking for a good brunch spot, the Oriental Pearl Restaurant.
Thanks for tuning in. To ensure you don't miss any episodes, subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell, go ahead and click that thumbs up button if you like what you saw, and go ahead and share it on social media.